I'm Dr. John Gartner.
And I'm Dr. Harry Segal.
And welcome to another session of Shrinking Trump.
Well, this is our 55th show. We've been at this since April. And John and I are both clinical psychologists, and we really got together to make this show because we were so concerned during the campaign that the media, the elites, and the public were unaware of Trump's cognitive decline, as well as his severe personality disorder called malignant narcissism, which results in his grandiosity, his proclaiming himself the best at everything, his criminal behavior, his lack of empathy, and more pronounced in the last couple of years than before, his compulsive lying so compulsive that he just does it all the time without any thought to it. I think that's part of his decline. Anyway, we've been talking about Trump and the psychological aspect of his functioning within the political sphere, and also the threat that he and his pathology really hold for the country. And this has been a really terrible couple of weeks because we were off last week, right, John?
Well, I picked a hell of a time to go on vacation.
You did.
I really did. We were actually talking about it, that we were sorry that we were on vacation that week because so much happened. We've said that every week, but I mean, my God, the National Guard were put on the streets in Los Angeles, and he's escalating towards martial law, which we predicted. We predicted that he was going to put troops on the street. And we predicted that he would use the agitation around his policies in general, and maybe immigration in particular, as the excuse to put soldiers on the street, which is really what he wants to do in terms of creating an authoritarian state backed up by essentially a civilian-directed military coup. That's what he's trying to do. So we knew that was going to happen, but it's, again, as we've said, Harry, happened very quickly. And in addition to that, we also had his crazy military parade, his little dick dictator wannabe parade is what I think of it as. And we'll be talking about that today. And then we've had all of these attacks on Democratic congressmen and representatives. And of course, we've had the assassination. So a lot has happened. Oh, and also there's a new Middle Eastern war that's been started that we may be getting into. And there was no King's Day, which really was the largest demonstration in American history. 5 to 7 million people.
Exactly. In 2,000 individual demonstrations in cities and towns across the country. And this is part of a kind of an American resistance. Our guest today, Dr. Anaita Dua, talks about the American spirit and claiming, of course, that we began our country in rebellion against a king. Right. And I think we're seeing some of that in the cultural DNA in the No King's March, but it's going against a I believe, very persuasive and powerfully disturbed and powerful wannabe dictator. And it's a collision of those two things. And John and I have been watching this, as we say, for months now. And it's a little bit like watching a really suspenseful play in slow motion. Like we keep seeing it happening and happening and happening. And we're here both to observe it and also to support all of you, the people who watch this show or listen to this show, because this generates tremendous anxiety and rage and helplessness in everyone, including us. We're not immune or exempt from the human experience. We just happen to be trained to help other people with theirs. But that doesn't mean we're not suffering too. So we really think of this as a place for you to both think about political events, but to reflect on them psychologically.
Well, did you want to start by talking about the National Guard in L.A.?
Yeah, this is a segment that John and I talked about and thought about calling macho posturing. Because one thing I've been noticing about Trump, when he does something that is genuinely toward autocracy, he tends to do it and then take it back and then do it again. So it's like he tries things out to see if he gets slapped. And if he doesn't get slapped too much, then he can do it more. So, for example, he put the National Guard and 200 Marines in L.A. Against the wishes of the governor and the mayor of L.A. And who it was very clear that the disruption, the violence was in about 2 square city blocks. The LA police had no problems handling it. And Trump went on television and said, LA would have burned to the ground if it weren't for me. So there's the autocratic imposition. And he justified it in such a way that essentially it sets a precedent for him doing it anywhere else. On the other hand, the 2,000 National Guards made no arrests, didn't beat up anybody, stood around buildings. So did the Marines. So he both did something implicitly violent and perhaps predictively violent. But in this case, he kind of held back a little bit. And I'm pointing this out not to say that this isn't a danger. This makes it more dangerous because it assuages some people to think, well, maybe he won't go all the way.
I do think in the culture of the military, there is a strong tradition of not being politicized and not attacking the American people. It goes against the fundamental nature. It really does go against the DNA of our military. Even when we won the Revolutionary War, there was an argument about whether we should have a standing military or navy because there was a fear that they would attack the American people. And so the idea that the military is under civilian control and they're not used for suppressing crime or disorder in the United States, unless the most extreme circumstances of invasion or whatever. But then in others, there's a strong culture of we don't do that here. And so I think there's some resistance in the part of the military to become violent against the American people. However, they are standing there backing up the local police and the ICE agents who are being very violent.
No, the ICE agents have no such compunction.
Right.
That's not it. But I think you're absolutely right. I mean, that even when there was national action against the resistance to desegregation in the early 60s, it was the National Guard, not the military, who were sent in.
That's a good point.
And so I completely agree with you. And I think that tradition really also stems from the Civil War, which was a very painful time when Americans were killing each other, when soldiers were attacking soldiers who were also American, but from the South. And it was a very worthy war, and I'm glad it was won. But I think that's also left a kind of distaste about fighting against Americans on American soil. But in any case, this was Trump's post on Truth Social about the LA demonstrations. If they spit, we will hit. This is a statement from the President of the United States concerning the catastrophic Gavin Newsom-inspired riots going on in Los Angeles. They're not inspired by Gavin Newsom. The insurrectionists, there's that important word, right, John?
Yep.
That would justify invoking the Insurrection Act, which would allow him to declare martial law. The insurrectionists have a tendency to spit in the face of the National Guardsmen, women, and others. Evidence for that? These patriots are told to accept this. It's just the way life runs. But not in the Trump administration. If they spit, we will hit. And I promise you, they will be hit harder than they have ever been hit before. Such disrespect will not be tolerated.
Well, the part of what they do is create this false narrative. And we're going to see this theme going all the way through the show. All of these repressive measures are always being justified by a false narrative. So he's saving LA, LA was burning, right? And he's saving LA. Not true. It's new scum and tired. Not true. They're spitting in the National Guard's face. Not true. Later, we're going to find out that they're roughing up all these Democratic politicians because apparently these Democratic politicians are body slamming and assaulting these muscular ICE agents, these little, not true. So they're justifying their brutal behavior by claiming that the people are doing things they're just not doing.
Right. So it's really it's macho posturing against events that haven't happened. Right. So it's really like a Xerox of a Xerox. Anyway, let's listen to tough man Tom Homan, the head of the border czar, who's really out of central casting as a hood.
Yeah.
And there have been threats, previously that if you stand in the way of your enforcement operations, you could be subject potentially to arrest. Are you saying that about Mayor Bass and Governor Newsom? Are they at risk of being arrested?
I'll say it about anybody. You cross that line. It's a felony to knowingly harbor and conceal an illegal alien. It's a felony to impede law enforcement from doing their job.
Do you think that the mayor of LA is doing that?
If she crossed that line, we'll ask the DOJ to prosecute. Do I think she's crossed the line? I don't think she's crossed the line yet.
He did not rule out literally arresting you, nor Mayor Bass, if you interfere in his work. He said you hadn't yet.
He's a tough guy. Why doesn't he do that? He knows where to find me.
I like that response.
Yeah, I do think Silverov is kind of baiting both of them to see if he can get them, but that's what the media does. But no, Newsom has been actually fantastic. It's been his week.
Yeah, no, he really has. And we're going to show another piece of videotape from Newsom. And this is a kind of transitioning to a different topic. We keep wanting to bring to your attention, you, the audience, the current, continuing, progressing signs of Trump's cognitive decline. And one of the things that's been frustrating is how little it's spoken about. Well, here's Gavin Newsom taking it head on.
He came out and said that when you guys spoke, he warned you that if you didn't get things under control, he was going to bring in troops.
Stone cold liar. Stone cold liar. He made that up, like he makes up so many other things. He never said that.
And he also seemed to make up this idea that the National Guard did a great job last night when they weren't here.
They weren't even deployed, and he claimed victory. He's lost it. He hasn't lost a step. And I saw him trip on the steps today. Yeah. I mean, this is serious. He is not the same person that I dealt with just 4 years ago. And he's incapable now of even a train of thought. He's making things up, and he's putting people's lives at risk. And he's got a band of people that are complicit in this. And that's what's so damn alarming.
He's incapable of a continuous thought.
Right. And he's doing, and Newsom is exactly right. He's doing, John, what you and I would call fabulizing. That is, he can generate discourse that sounds syntactically coherent, but they're just made up. By the way, Newsom is he's doing something very important here. We talked on the show a few episodes ago after Jake Tapper's book came out, because people were saying that Biden was not the same person he was several years earlier, right? Newsom is saying it in a very convincing way.
Yeah.
And this is what needs to be said over and over again. Yes,
exactly. And we need to get the courage among our leaders to say the emperor, has no brain, because it's true. And we can all see it. For example, I'm just going to give you 3 little examples of Trump's dementia of the week. 3 examples of the week of Trump's dementia. First, we've talked about phonemic paraphasias, where people can't finish an English word, so they kind of make up a word that sounds like it, a simpler word, an easier word that isn't actually a word. It's a series of sounds that resemble a word.
Right.
Like, for example, if you were trying to say infantry man.
There is no earthly force more powerful than the brave heart of a U.S. infantryman.
Infantryman.
Infantryman, right. Again, just classic demented stuff. He can't say infantryman, so he just simplifies the word to infantryman, which isn't a word. Like I said, he cannot go a week without a phonemic paraphasia, which is one reason I keep pointing it out, because this is ongoing evidence, folks, of his cognitive decline. But, it gets worse. Donald Trump seems to be very, very confused about American history. The Revolutionary War, the Civil War, World War II, the present, they all get kind of confused. For example, hear what he has to say about Putin's bravery during World War II.
We're celebrating World War II, our victory. And then I called somebody else, and I happened to speak to President Putin at the time. Now, in all fairness to him, he lost 51 million people, and he did fight. Russia fought. Sort of interesting, isn't it? He fought with us in World War II, and everybody hates him. And Germany and Japan, they're fine. Someday somebody will explain that, but I like Germany and Japan too. But Putin is a little confused by that, He said, we lost 51 million people and we were your ally. And now everybody hates Russia and they love Germany and Japan. I said, let's explain that sometime, okay?
Yeah, I don't get it. I mean, Putin fought on our side in World War II. What do we have against him? I mean, that is crazy, right? He's disoriented. He really doesn't, I think, understand time. He just kind of grabs things, right, from his mind, but he doesn't order them on any kind of coherent timeline.
Well, they're in the same neighborhood.
Right.
But they're
right.
like he didn't say, Russia fought and lost 50 million men. And I've spoken about that with Putin.
Right.
That,
right.
It's not appreciated that Russia, your predecessors fought with us in 19 late 30s and 40s. Right. I mean, instead it's like fine. Instead it was like, well, Putin fought with us. He fought with us. And so there's this
right.
kind of strange, it's like a dissolution. Things are getting kind of watered down, and yet they're swimming in the same tank.
So
kind
things
like
that are kind of adjacent get kind of absorbed, right? And yeah.
And you see that in dementia. You see people speaking vaguely about things, and they're kind of related. It's not like they're random. It's not like fish table, lamb stew.
Right. Right.
It's more like the things on my table. That's like a table at home, but let's table that, and it's more like that.
It's kind of a chain of loose associations that creates this kind of tangentiality and confabulation, where you kind of put things together in a new way.
Exactly, but they're close enough together that if you don't really pay attention, it sounds kind of okay.
Like, for example, I don't know if you know this, but the Declaration of Independence was really the thing that sparked the Civil War.
Let's see it.
Especially with war. Things change with war. It can go from one extreme to the other. War is very bad. There was no reason for this to be a war. There was no reason for Russia, Ukraine. A lot of wars there was no reason for. You look right up there, I don't know, see the Declaration of Independence, and I say, I wonder if the Civil War, it always seemed to me maybe that could have been solved without losing 600,000 plus people. So a lot of, it's very sad to see. It's very sad to see what's happening.
You look at the Declaration of Independence and you think, did we really have to have a civil war? Well, first of all, yes, because otherwise we'd still have slavery.
Well, there's that.
Yeah, there's that. But also the Declaration of Independence was not a declaration of war for the Civil War. It was a declaration of war for the Revolutionary War. I mean, think about how demented you have to be to get those things confused. And this guy is president.
But again, they're close enough.
Yeah.
So that it sounds coherent if you don't think about it.
Right. And that's what you're saying, is that's the way the mind works. The mind doesn't work randomly. There is no random behavior in the mind. The mind is always working through association. So
always
it makes sense that as the mind is declining, that you would be combining things that are associated with each other, but just in the wrong way. Yeah,
you lose the precision, right? You lose the precision so that it becomes a looser association.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I have to take this 1 second to tell the audience what I always tell my students, which is Descartes was wrong. It's not I think, therefore I am. It's I associate, therefore I am. Really, our associations, that is our personality. That really is who we are. That's how we express ourselves. And when our brain starts to deteriorate, whether it's through stress, trauma, injury, decline, those associations become looser. Sometimes so loose that they make no sense.
Right. And again, we're not, as a society, we are not naming the demented elephant in the room. Okay. I mean, this is crazy, folks.
But John, he's very powerful. He intimidates people. He's pushed Congress around to the point where they're submitting to him. They're giving away all their power.
Yeah.
He goes after stuff that no one's gone after, and everyone fades and falls. I mean, you can have cognitive decline and a severe personality disorder and be very powerful. I mean, look at Hitler and Stalin and Mussolini. And Kim Jong-un. I mean, come on. I mean, these are not incompatible, sadly.
Yeah.
And there's nothing more terrifying than a mad king.
Right. I think, we could sort of debate, how evil these different people were, and they're all malignant narcissists. But I don't think Hitler was demented, and there's the combination of malignant narcissism with dementia in the most powerful human being on the planet is a terrifying and insane scenario.
It's like pouring gasoline on a fire.
Yeah.
It's an accelerant.
Yeah. You talked about his impulsivity. We don't have a section on the war today, but I just wanted to say that people are saying, well, will he or won't he? Will he bomb Iran? Won't he bomb Iran? And he actually, there's a quote where he actually said, I usually decide in the last few minutes.
Right.
Like he's telling us he's going to make an impulsive decision. Like he'll just, it's like, well, at the last minute, I'll see how I feel.
Because, as he would say, whatever I think of is best. So,
that's right. Demented Donnie always knows best.
All right.
Well, that was immigration.
By the way, I just thank you for finding that clip about the Declaration of Independence. I mean, I just couldn't believe it when I saw it.
You look at that and you just wonder, did we have to have a civil war? I mean, really?
Well, let's get to what I consider to be a small break on his marching toward autocracy, and that is Trump's terror of losing popularity. One reason why, by the way, he's going back and forth on whether or not to attack Iran is because he has known for a long time his supporters are the working class who gave so many people to to Iraq and Afghanistan that he has a deal with them. I will not go to war with you guys ever. That's his bond with them. And so he's really caught in a conflict because he also doesn't want Iran to get the nuclear weapon, et cetera. I'm just talking about his conflict because the one thing that pushes Trump back is the loss of popularity.
Right.
It really affects him. And, with the tough guy immigration policy with Stephen Miller, that sort of, we like to call him a Jewish Nazi in the administration, telling ICE agents that they don't have 3,000 arrests per day. He'll fire the people who bring in the bottom 10% number of people arrested. That's why ICE has been arresting people who don't have a criminal record because they're easy to get. The ones who show up to their court dates, they're easy to get. Criminals, really hard to find because they're criminals, right? They know how to hide, right? And Trump is starting to get a lot of pushback from this small businesses and from farms and restaurants. And so he floats. He doesn't really do it.
Right.
He floats this idea on Truth Social. Our great farmers and people in the hotel and leisure business have been stating that our very aggressive policy on immigration is taking very good long-time workers away from them, with those jobs being almost impossible to replace. In many cases, the criminals allowed into our country by the very stupid Biden open borders policy are applying for those jobs. This is not good. We must protect our farmers, but get the criminals out of the USA. Changes are coming. That makes no sense, by the way.
Right.
That makes absolutely no sense.
Right.
But what we're hearing is there's a problem with arresting good, hardworking people who may be here illegally, but are members of society and crucial to these businesses. And this is Trump trying to assuage in the short term, right? John and I have been talking about this. He's always about a short game. He's never about a long game. So this, he hopes, will assuage the people taking part in the demonstrations and all that stuff. And it looked like for a few days that this is going to happen. So here's Amy Walter, who, by the way, I'm a big fan of Amy Walter. I've been watching her forever. She's now running the Cook Report. She's a great pollster. Check her out on Meet the Press, talking about why this is a problem for Trump.
If you look at the president's overall rating on immigration, it's still above water. And part of the reason, if you look under it in some of the polling, is that people think that those getting prioritized for deportation are the bad guys, the criminals. If you look individually at the polling about what people support and who they support deporting, if it's people who've lived in this country for years, don't have a criminal record, most Americans, including the like 30-40% of Trump voters, say, no, we shouldn't be deporting them. So once you get into the individual cases, it becomes a much tougher sell, which is why you do have the president saying, let's have these carve-outs. If the focus is on them, then his poll numbers are not going to stay as high.
And he pays a lot of attention to stuff like this. That's right.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because I think I liked the way you put it, that he pushes as far as he can. Then if there's a lot of pushback, he pulls back, and then he returns to his original position. So the other thing that he does is he just declares that he's doing the opposite of what he's doing, if what he's doing is unpopular, and he gets away with it, especially because Fox News will amplify it. So in other words, what Amy Cook is saying is, as a general policy, there's a majority in the country, a small majority that believes, yeah, we should get tough on immigration. We need to do that. Okay, so they believe that general concept. But when you get to the specifics, should we be pulling people out of restaurants and farms and hotels and people who've been here for 30 years? And no, those aren't the people that we should be deporting. So he realizes people are in favor of deportation, just not in favor of deporting all these hardworking, honest people who we need. So he says, oh, I'm not doing that anymore. And then people on Fox say, oh, he's carving it out. Oh, good. Then people are listening. Oh, good. Well, that makes more sense. So he's carving it out. He's not deporting the people that are working in these businesses, except that he is. He's just lying about the fact that he's carving it out. But the point is, they'll hear the lie and they'll be relieved.
Well, and the next thing he said was that they're going to focus on cities and blue states. Right. And then it turns out he's not really pulling back on this. Right. So it's all a lie. And it's probably because Stephen Miller talked him out of it, which is, Stephen Miller has his ear. It's
but he always tells a lie. He always says the opposite. I mean, after he took away abortion rights, he said, no one protects women's rights as much as I do. You just took away women's rights. How can you say that you're giving women's rights? But he just says it. And people buy it. The other thing I just have to comment on is that this scenario he presents is like, well, after we deported all the restaurant workers, then all the criminals applied for their jobs. And we can't have that. So no, I really don't think that after they deported all the people who are doing, low paying, hardworking, low paying jobs, that all the criminals said, oh, there's a real opportunity to work for minimum wage. Let's go for it.
Yeah, I think I'm going to give up my gang work and
wait tables.
I mean, it's just it's ludicrous how little sense it makes.
Right,
it really is. Let's go on to the ICE agents have been roughing up democratic officials. I mean, people, senators, controllers of New York City. So here is and Senator Padilla from California, and who, not everybody naturally has dignity. Mm-hmm. And he is known for being someone with genuine dignity and humility. bearing. He's admired by everyone in California. I've read all of these interviews with people who were like flabbergasted that he would be treated this way. I mean, really offended.
Oh my God! Yes,
he's an extraordinary person. He's the son of migrants. Not only was he obviously an excellent high school student, went to MIT, got a degree in engineering. I mean, I don't know if folks out there know this, but to get into MIT for engineering is brilliant. It's just, you have to be so exceptional. And yet here he is, as a public servant and as a senator.
And just to set it up before we see the tape so people
please
understand the context. So Kristi Noem was giving a press conference, and he comes to the press conference and he wants to ask a question.
John, I'm going to back it up even more.
Yeah.
He's invited to the same facility for a briefing in a separate room. He hears Kristi Noem is giving a press conference. He's been trying to ask her about the way that migrants are being treated. So he then enters the press conference with security with him. Okay? He's not just randomly walking in somewhere, right? And then this happens.
Guys, ready? And bell. Sir, hands up. I'm Senator Alex Padilla. I have questions for the secretary, because the fact of the matter is a half a dozen violent criminals that you're rotating on your hands off.
How many of our ICE agents have been docked?
On the ground. Hands behind your back.
If you let my hands go and stand behind my back.
Brutal.
If for those of you who haven't seen it, you're hearing it on our audio podcast. He's being pushed to the ground, handcuffed on the ground on his stomach.
Yeah. I mean, this is just amazing. I mean, these brown shirts, and that's what they are. They're brown shirts. These ICE agents with masks feel free to violently assault anyone and everyone. It's unbelievable. I mean, senator.
They've been given that authority, and no one's fighting it. And I hope you all heard that he announced who he was. Because Kristi Noem said, we didn't know who he was. He didn't announce himself. He seemed to be a danger. She spoke to him afterwards. That's always the way it works, right? They always talk to the person they violated afterwards. They did that in Newark too. So listen, Senator Padilla gave a really powerful speech on the floor of the Senate, but I thought we should really see his statement after this event. This is right afterwards. He came out and met with the press, and he gave this is a portion of his statement.
I'm here in Los Angeles today, and I was here in the federal building, in the conference room, awaiting a scheduled briefing from federal officials as part of my responsibility as a senator to provide oversight and accountability. While I was waiting for the briefing with General Guillot, I learned that Secretary Noem was having a press conference a couple of doors down the hall. Since the beginning of the year, but especially over the course of recent weeks, several of my colleagues, have been asking the Department of Homeland Security for more information and more answers on their increasingly extreme immigration enforcement actions. And we've gotten little to no information in response to our inquiries. And so I came to the press conference to hear what she had to say, to see if I could learn any new additional information. And at one point, I had a question. And let me emphasize, just as we've emphasized the right for people to peacefully protest and to stand up for their First Amendment rights, for our fundamental rights. I was there peacefully. At one point, I had a question. And so I began to ask a question. I was almost immediately forcibly removed from the room. I was forced to the ground, and I was handcuffed. I was not arrested. I was not detained. I will say this. If this is how this administration responds to a senator with a question, if this is how the Department of Homeland Security responds to a senator with a question, you can only imagine what they're doing to farm workers, to cooks, to day laborers out in the Los Angeles community and throughout California and throughout the country.
They're criminalizing even asking a question. And this is happening all. And I like the fact that he says, if they can do this to me, imagine what they're doing to everyone else. There's all of these videos and examples of people who are saying to ICE agents, do you have a warrant? What is your authority for doing this? Why? And they say, back off, ma'am. If you continue to ask us questions, we will arrest you for interfering with federal officers.
Yeah, no. And we're going to show some more of that. But I think I hope you all could hear the dignity in Padilla, but also his voice was nearly breaking toward the ends, because that's where he came from. Community of migrant workers, of people coming to America to make good. Such an extraordinary person. Now we're going to show a clip from little Mikey Johnson, the Speaker of the House, who I really despise.
You really detest.
He's a creep, and he is self-righteous and unctuous. And here he is, and he's being baited by the media, by the way, who say, did Padilla do anything wrong? And so he says, yeah, he did some things wrong. And then they bait him and say, well, shouldn't the Senate do something about it? The press is really always needling everybody. And Johnson starts getting kind of excited. I always think that, like, deep down, he's getting kind of excited about, censoring people and hurting them. And so he then, if you listen to him, I'm only showing you a clip of it. I wish I could show you the whole 5 minutes, but it's too long. But what happens is he starts to exaggerate until it was Padilla at fault. Watch.
Right.
We have to turn the temperature down. We need to be on the side of the rule of law. We need to be on the side of law and order. We need to be on the side of calm and not chaos. And when members go into these settings and act this way, that when they push law enforcement agents around, when they storm cabinet secretaries in a press conference, I think it is wildly inappropriate behavior, and I think it sets a terrible message and tone for the rest of the country. I think that behavior at a minimum is, it rises to the level of a censure. I think there needs to be a message sent by the body as a whole that is not what we are going to do. That's not how we're going to act. We're not going to have branches fighting physically and having senators charging cabinet secretaries.
He didn't charge cabinet secretary. It's a lie.
It's a total lie. And you can see how excited he gets. I really think that, like, little Mikey Johnson's going like, we can't have people charging people, because then we'd have to really spank them. We'd have to hurt them back.
Okay, well, I don't know what his kinks are, Harry.
I just want to stay away from my app. My son doesn't know what I'm looking at, because I'm just getting so excited. I mean, he's such a vile human being. I mean,
but again, they're all lying. They're all saying, but this whole regime is based on lies, and so now he's the senator is charging a cabinet official.
Yeah, I mean, assaulting them. I mean, he's basically saying he took a swing at Kristi Noem. I mean, but seriously, what an opportunity! What an opportunity for the Speaker of the House to say, we have differences in this country, and he even began by saying we have to turn the temperature down.
Yeah,
and say, this went too far against one of our own. We support the president and his policies. But when those agents treat members of our august institution like we're common criminals with trumped up charges, we have to set a limit. I listen, maybe I'm thinking too kindly, but I don't think Paul Ryan would have done this. I really don't.
Actually, I agree with you. I think that and it's good you bring up Paul Ryan, because I despise Paul Ryan. I hate Paul Ryan. Okay, so but I hate these people so much more, right? Because Paul Ryan, you're right. There was a vestige of conscience. There was a vestige of humanity. There was a vestige of integrity, even though I disagree with him and he seemed to overlook Russia, et cetera, et cetera. We could go on and on. But what we're talking about, there is a devolution happening here, right? Where we are really getting not just the worst people, we're getting the worst of the worst people.
No, because Paul Ryan was not morally corrupt. He was wrong.
But
he wasn't morally corrupt. This guy pretends and believes he's this Christian good person, and he's really a destructive monster.
Yeah.
And self-righteous. He believes everything he says because he's so self-important. He practically swaggers in that little frame of his.
Right. But we talk about all the lies and how this is a psychopathic regime where they will tell a lie and all parrot it, and it'll play on Fox. I'm sure half the people who watch Fox think that, Senator Padilla, slapped Kristi Noem across the face or lunged at her podium when he said, I have a question. Lunged, right? They keep using this. Or remember when they were talking about how the 4'11", 70-year-old African-American congressman had body slammed an ICE agent and she got on TV and you just look at her, just look at me. Do I look like someone who could body slam an ICE agent?
But John, what's so terrifying is it doesn't matter if there's video. It doesn't matter. We have videos of both of them. There's Padilla saying, I am Senator Padilla from California. And Kristi Noem goes, he didn't announce who he was. It's on tape.
Right. That's what's so scary about this post-truth reality. Even if it's on tape, they can say it isn't true. Like, who are you going to believe? The Fuhrer or your lying eyes?
Well, right. And that's why I think Paul Ryan was wrong, but Mike Johnson is morally corrupt. And I just want, Rand Paul, who really is his own guy for the most part. Sometimes he sides with the Trump bullshit, but he's kind of his own guy. And he was hemming and hawing, as God turned on the temperature. But then finally on Meet the Press, Kristen Welker said to him point blank, do you agree that Padilla should be censured the way Mike Johnson suggested? And this is Rand Paul's brief response.
So you wouldn't be for censoring him? You're a no on censoring him, Senator?
No. I'm not for censoring him.
Okay.
I think that's crazy. I'm not for that at all.
I think that's crazy.
Yeah, I'm glad he said that. It's funny, we've quoted Rand Paul on the show before, and we have another clip of him later in the show. And, really, politics does make strange bedfellows, because never would I have thought I'd be on the same side as Rand Paul on anything. But because Rand Paul is really an outlier, he is a rebel, he is his own person. He's a libertarian. He's not really a Republican. He's kind of got his own worldview. He is actually speaking out in an independent way about what's going on more than any other senators that I've been able to say, even the quote few good Republican senators. So it's kind of funny, but he's really kind of calling it like it is. So I'm glad that he called that crazy, and we'll look to another quote, from him later. Oh, by the way, I do want to say, because people are going to complain about this, I'm sure in the live stream they're probably already bitching about it. That Paul Ryan, you said he's not corrupt. I don't think that I would agree that Paul Ryan is not corrupt. But I think that corruption exists maybe on a spectrum. Do you know what I mean? Okay. So you can have a half rotten apple, you know what I mean? Or you can have one that's just completely mush and totally rotten and has no structure or substance and doesn't even resemble an apple anymore.
I'll just never forget when Paul Ryan introduced Donald Trump for his first State of the Union. And that the Sergeant of Arms says to the Speaker, Mr. Speaker, I present to you the President of the United States. And then the Speaker in turn says, ladies and gentlemen, I present to you. And Ryan looked at the camera and said, and ladies and gentlemen, I prevent, caught himself and said, I present.
That's funny.
It's a Freudian slip, which I show every year. In my
that's funny. The other thing I want to say about Paul Ryan's corruption I'm sure a lot of you remember this tape. This is early on with, when Russia was not being investigated. There we came across a tape where who was it? Kevin McCarthy says, I hear that Donald Trump and Rohrabacher from California, that they get their money from Russia. And Paul Ryan said, shh, we'll just keep that within the family.
Oh no. Okay, I'm on your
side.
That
tape? Do you remember that tape?
Okay, half rotten. but nothing's as bad as little Mikey Johnson. I'm sorry.
No, because it keeps devolving. It keeps getting worse, right? I mean, nobody would argue that Bill Barr, right, had integrity. Right? But yet, he still had a vestige of integrity, that there was a line he wouldn't cross. He would not say that the election was a fraud. And so, of course, then, do you think that Pam Bondi will have any problems with that when we get to 2028?
No. Pam is perpetually excited.
Well, I mean, she's the totally rotten apple. She's the smushed rotten apple. She has no integrity.
John, can we just make this one psychological point, if we can, which is when corruption becomes that total, the person believes they're the opposite. No one, it's not like the villains in Batman. No one says, I'm evil. I'm going to do evil today. What they say is, I'm saving the world.
Mm-hmm.
And Bonnie doesn't think she's corrupt. She thinks she's doing the right thing. So does Mikey Johnson. And that shows how corrupt they are.
Right. And also there's this paranoid, there is a kind of way in which Trump's malignant narcissism is becoming the DNA of the Republican Party, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm not doing anything bad because there's those really bad people. They're really bad. We got to do something with them. They're bad. They're hitting 90-year-old ladies over the head with baseball bats. And, and so the paranoia is those people are bad and we're good. And so anything we have to do by any means necessary, right, to block and stop and obviate those bad people is a righteous act. And we're going to get very soon to the Minnesota assassin who thought he was doing a righteous act.
Well, let's talk about that when we get there. But you had one more tape you wanted to show of.
Well, and so this is becoming a trend. You saw that horrifying video with Padilla. Well, something very similar happened with the New York City controller. I don't remember what the procedure was, where he was asking a question or he was
peacefully protesting their grabbing an illegal immigrant. He was there at civil disobedience. So he really was asking to be. He was there in civil disobedience. On the other hand, the way he's taken is just disgusting.
Right. Again, here's another violent encounter with a Democratic lawmaker,
right?
Who's just exercising his First Amendment rights,
right, and who's also running for mayor, also, by the way. Okay.
Judicial warrant. Do you have a judicial warrant? Do you have a judicial warrant? Can I see the judicial warrant? Can I see the warrant? I will let go when you show me the judicial warrant. Where is it? Where is the warrant? I have it in my hand here. You obstructed. You obstructed. I would like to let go. I'll let go. I'd like to see the warrant. Put him in custody. No! Take it back. Take it back. Take it back. Step back. You don't have authority. You don't have authority to arrest U.S. citizens. Sir, you don't have the authority to arrest U.S. citizens. You don't have the, I'm not obstructing. I'm standing right here in the hallway. I asked to see the judicial warrant. By asking for a judicial warrant? You don't have the authority to arrest U.S. citizens asking for a judicial warrant.
Horrifying.
There it is.
You don't have the authority to arrest you. Well, they're doing it anyway.
Right.
Warrant schmorrant. So this is really an assault on our. This is an assault on our most fundamental rights. That you can just be body slammed, disappeared, whatever, if you dare to express opposition.
You certainly can be. You can. Well, again, I just want to be clear how far down the rabbit hole we are in our country. Padilla was not charge, this guy was let go. They were not disappeared. But if you're an illegal immigrant or you have anything questionable, you can be disappeared and sent to El Salvador where you'll die. So they are doing it to nobodies. That's why Padilla was being so clear about, if they do this to me, can you imagine what they're doing to people who have no stature? Right.
Well, if you're sending someone to El Salvador, then you're a death squad.
Right. Oh, yeah. Oh, no. Listen, I just saying they're not yet arresting and murdering democratically officials by ICE agents. However, look what happened in Minnesota, right? You want to introduce that?
Right. Well, I want to talk about, we've been talking about stochastic terrorism really throughout this entire show. But 2 weeks ago, we spoke about it specifically because Trump was musing that he might pardon the gang who plotted to kidnap and potentially murder Governor Whitmer of Michigan. So, I mean, this is a high-level assassination plot, okay? And he's talking about pardoning them, okay, because they were railroaded and they were just having some loose drunk talk. You and I said 2 weeks ago, this is a message. This is a very clearly thinly coded message. It's okay to kidnap or shoot or kill Democratic politicians. And I said to you 2 weeks ago before the break, I said, we are going to start hearing about Democratic politicians being assassinated in direct response to Trump's call for action. And what I want, so we all know about this Minnesota assassin, right? We know that he's MAGA. We know that actually I think he stated something about the Los Angeles situation as one of his motivators. You know, when we think of assassins, right, in this country, we think of mentally ill, and that most mentally ill people are not violent. We always have to say this as psychologists, that actually the mentally ill are violent at a lower rate than the non-mentally ill. So
way lower.
It's not to stigmatize the mentally ill, but occasionally you have someone who is out of reality, who does do something violent. It happens. And so you have like people like a John Hinckley, you know, who killed John Lennon, or the person who, David Chapman, who has tried to assassinate Reagan. These are
other way around, but that's okay, John. Keep going.
Okay. But these are the kind of people who are the classic, lone wolves. They're loners. They don't have any friends. They're kind of withdrawn. Nobody knew that they had this potential. This type of assassin, I want to point out, the only assassin that I would compare this to is John Wilkes Booth. John Wilkes Booth was part of an organized assassination gang, and it was an organized attempt not only to kill Lincoln but to kill his entire cabinet. His Secretary of War was beaten, within an inch of his life.
I know that.
I think it was a Secretary of War, or Secretary of State, but it's all in the history books. But in other words, this was a true plot, an organized plot, and they were doing it because they were Southern sympathizers. They had a political motivation to organize to commit this assassination. That's what we're starting to see with this Minnesota assassination, because in addition to his being MAGA and being a Republican and citing Trump's policies as his motivator, and doing it in a very clever, organized way by pretending to be a policeman, by showing up in a uniform, having an assassination list. What the piece of tape I'm going to show you now, the reason I'm going to show it to you is I want people to understand this is a different type of assassin. This is not the lone wolf, crazy person who's, acting on their own.
Well,
these are true believers.
I want to just, it's sort of in between, right? So what John is saying is the lone wolf psychotic killer is hearing voices, has delusions, thinks that when he's shooting up an elementary school, there's a good reason for it. It's psychotic, meaning it's not part of reality. And then you have people like John Wilkes Booth and his group who were, very conscious, rational assassins. You get conspirators who think it's okay to murder, Lincoln. I think this guy is in between the two. That is, he's working alone,
right?
But he's not hearing voices and acting crazy. He's acting out of ideological fervor.
Right, out of ideological fervor. David Brooks, I didn't have time, but I wanted to show a video of him that I thought was so interesting. He said, really MAGA, they asked him, is there a place for conservatives anymore? And he says, well, MAGA has really destroyed two American institutions. One is conservatism, because they really are repugnant to every single value that conservatives try to conserve. So, they're calling themselves conservatives, but they're really anti-conservative. And he says the other thing they've destroyed is American Christianity. Because now it's being, again, retrofitted to be part of this white Christian nationalist regime change takeover. So what I want to show you here is this is a little videotape. It's a little confusing because you'll hear it's being translated into French because the assassin was giving a sermon. Okay. And let's hear all of his excitement about Jesus.
And I'm just as excited about Jesus.
Et je suis juste excité
right
de
here,
Jésus.
right now.
Jusqu'à présent, même maintenant.
And when I get excited,
et quand je suis excité,
I want to dance.
Je veux danser.
And what Jesus did for me.
C'est que Jésus a fait pour moi.
Jesus is God.
Jésus est Dieu.
Almighty God.
C'est le Dieu puissant.
He saved my life.
Il a sauvé ma vie.
I'm excited about God.
Je suis excité de Dieu.
And I want to worship Him.
Et c'est pourquoi je l'adore.
Because He's coming again. And
Jésus, il revient encore.
And He's got plans. He's got plans
de plans
and purposes.
Et le dessein
for each one of you.
Pour chacun de vous ici.
And for me.
Well, bless your heart. Praise the Lord and pass the ammo.
Amazing. It seems to be maybe a Haitian church, because it was that black minister who was translating in the side, which is that's really I'm sure Jesus really wanted him to go murder two innocent people and nearly kill two more. I'm sure that was something that Jesus really was placing in his heart.
Well, because Jesus has done so much for him, that's the least he could do, right?
And we have to remember Melissa Hortman and her husband. I saw pictures of her and heard people interviewed about her. What a lovely person she was. And it's so horrible what this man has done. And John and I are not mentioning his name because I don't believe in mentioning the names of killers on the air. I hate it when it's done in the mainstream. I hate it. So he shall be nameless.
He who shall not be named. But and just also to add, people have asked Trump several times, have you called Governor Walz to offer your sympathy? He goes, why should I speak to him, that liar and loser? And like he just doesn't get it. He did put out some kind of, I think it was really his staff, put out some kind of sympathy posting
he
about
did put out a statement. Yeah.
But like, I mean, and I think it was the staff that did it, frankly.
We should be grateful that, like he said, one right thing about this terrible event. Which
he actually caused.
Which he's inspiring. Absolutely. Yeah. But I do think that this is going to put maybe a brief pause on his pardoning the conspirators from Michigan. Let's hope. Even if it's a few weeks or months, because he can't do it now.
Yeah.
Although
the other thing. So the other thing that happened during the. Yeah.
What am I saying? Keep going.
What are you saying? The other thing that happened this week was this amazing, really historic split screen between Trump's fascist parade that he threw for himself, a little birthday party, and the No Kings rallies, which were the biggest demonstrations in American history. But I really want to zero in on just how big a failure this parade was. First of all, because Donald Trump has dementia, he falls asleep everywhere and anywhere, no matter how inappropriate or how stimulating the surroundings are. So I just want to start with, he threw himself a $45 million party, but here he is asleep. He's definitely asleep there. Okay, folks. And there's other videos. There's videos. This is a picture, but there's videos that show him with his head down and staying down. But don't forget, this is the guy who slept through his own criminal trial.
And the Pope's funeral.
Yeah. So he, look, the guy just passes out inappropriately, unexpectedly, unpredictably, often, because he has dementia, folks. Okay. But let's talk about just how big a failure this parade was. The biggest way it was a failure is the crowd size. They were expecting 250,000 people, and they got less than 1/10 of that. Okay. And so here, I just want to show you some videos. We actually put 2 videos together. One is an aerial shot of Washington, D.C., and you will see all the troops, and you will see that there is nobody on the sidewalk. Nobody. I mean, it looks like it's a ghost town. And then we're going to give you another video of the tanks going down the street closer to the reviewing stand, where you see a smattering of people. You know, the Wall Street Journal and New York Times used words like sparsely attended. So let's look at that video. Nobody on the sidewalk, folks. For those of you who are just listening, that's the reason I'm narrating this. There's nobody on the sidewalks. We're on Constitution Avenue, turning onto Pennsylvania Avenue. You can see the White House in the background. There's nobody there. And now they're closer, and you see the reviewing stands are 2/3 to 3/4 empty. There's no energy and excitement. It's just, you can literally hear the squeak of the tank as it goes down the street, because it's just, you could hear a pin drop. The other thing about the crowd size too is that they totally screwed up everything having to do with of course, because they're incompetent. So because they expected to have such a huge number of people, the entrance was on 14th Street, but you had to enter on 12th Street. Right. And I don't know if you've ever gone to like Disneyland, or, you know, how they have those lines where you have to go back and forth so they can sort of fold in like a large number of people in a small space. Well, actually, I was going to show a video of this, but we have too much video. But some woman took her phone and showed herself going through the barriers from 12, and hundreds of times she had to go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth and back and forth to get to the end, because they built out this huge infrastructure with all these bike racks and stuff. But there was nobody there. And have you ever been to the airport and you come at a weird time, and so you have to go back through the lines, you know?
Right. Going through customs, and it's empty. But you know, doesn't this speak though to the fact that in our national political culture, we don't have parades like this? The only time we have them is after a war, where we're welcoming people back. Otherwise, we don't do this. So of course, no one showed up. It's not part of what we do.
And funny you should mention that, because the soldiers seem to be aware of that. You know, in normal fascist military parades, you know, they march with the boots, you know, hitting the ground in perfect unison. It's very intimidating and loud and powerful. Okay. Well, it's known in the military that if you want to show disrespect, you walk, but not in formation. You amble. And look at this group of soldiers ambling down Pennsylvania Avenue.
They're just going for a stroll, John. You know, they're just walking down the street.
It's an amble. It's not really a parade. It's more like an amble.
Oh no, it's so disrespectful. I love it.
So that's their fuck you.
I could watch that all day. I really could. We should put that on a loop.
Yeah. And we talked about, you know, Rand Paul. Well, Rand Paul is denouncing the parade for the right reasons.
Your thoughts on the parade that's going to take place? Some Democrats are saying it's a waste of money.
Yeah. Never been a big fan of goose-stepping soldiers in big tanks and missiles rolling down the street. So if you ask me, I wouldn't have done it. I'm not sure what the actual expense of it is, but I'm not really, you know, we were always different than, you know, the images you saw of the Soviet Union and North Korea. We were proud not to be that. And I'm not proposing that that's the image people want to project, but I'm worried about the image, that it isn't necessarily the best image to show.
Right. He's calling it out. We've always been proud not to be North Korea and Russia. Personally, I'm not a big fan of goose-stepping soldiers.
I love it. Well, he's a libertarian. He doesn't like the force of the government. He wants a very limited government, including a very limited military, because libertarians are afraid of the military for good reason.
Right. And so he's trying to, he's the little dictator wannabe. I think that might be a new title for him, the little dictator wannabe, or the mushroom dictator wannabe. Just to make it more of a graphic image.
I think we got it.
But what's interesting is there was a video. It was circulating on Russian social media. I don't know, who did it or where it came from, but obviously, if it was out of step with how the government felt, it wouldn't have circulated. And they're making fun of him for being such a lame dictator, having such a lame dictator parade. So the subtitles are in Russian, and so what it says is, this is the parade that Trump wanted, and it shows North Korea, and it goes, this is the parade he got. North Korean soldiers, perfect formation. This is the parade he got.
It's the ambling men again.
It's the ambling men.
I could watch it all day. I love that satiric music. It's like it's like a wah-wah on the trumpet.
Right,
it's really great.
It's pretty great. But really, it is funny though, because I was always very afraid of this parade in a way. He's talked about it for years, and I've envisioned some North Korean style, a parade, and it is frightening to think about us becoming a dictatorship like them. And so I was so delighted that the thing was a complete and total and utter flop, and Trump knows it was an utter flop.
But thanks to the character of the American public that didn't come out for it.
Right.
That's not what we do.
Right. But of course, he blamed Pete Hegseth. This is so funny. Pete Hegseth couldn't be more incompetent at his job. Right? He's like tweeting out, the battle plans. But that's okay. And then he does it again. But that's okay. But he's furious that this parade did not provide him with the macho, kind of stimulus that he was hoping for.
No, he thinks of Hegseth as a segment producer for his presidential show.
Well, it's true. Actually, that is his real background. And he couldn't even do that because he produced a lousy parade. And what Trump was specifically angry about is that it wasn't intimidating enough. Let's hear what Michael Wolff, Trump biographer, has to say about that.
He's kind of pissed off. I mean, he's pissed off at the soldiers. I mean, he's accusing them of hamming it up. And by that he seems to mean that they were having a good time, that they were waving, that they were enjoying themselves and showing a convivial face rather than a military face.
Interesting.
And he kind of reamed out Hegseth for this. Apparently there was a phone call and he said to Hegseth, the tone was all wrong. Why was the tone wrong? Who staged this? There was the tone problem. Trump, he keeps repeating himself. So that was the word on that phone call was tone. I would interpret that he wanted something menacing, I suppose, something military, like something like, this is the most staggering force in the world, and maybe it will come for you. Instead of, I think it appeared to a lot of people that there was a kind of festive air. Everybody was actually celebrating something, the 250 years of the U.S. military probably celebrating that more than Donald Trump's birthday.
Didn't work. And meanwhile, on the split screen, right, there's so much inspiring video, from No King's Day. I mean, they were talking like 2,000 celebrations, 5 to 7 million people, probably the largest demonstration in American history. I just wanted to show one video that kind of spliced together some of the different cities. Again, for those people who are, just listening, I might narrate it a little bit. Here's Philadelphia. These are aerial views, so you can see how many tens of thousands of people are there. Chicago, same thing, a sea of people, a sea. Wheaton, Maryland, a suburb, driving down the street endlessly, people on the sidewalk going for like, seems like miles and miles. Boston, ginormous crowd. Nashville, St. Paul, Minnesota, Cincinnati, New York, yeah. But places like Grand Rapids, Michigan, which is actually a very conservative town. San Diego, another aerial view going for miles and miles of just a river, like a Mississippi River of human beings. Los Angeles, of course. That's who America is. That's who Americans are.
And if there is a chance of us surviving this assault on democracy, this is where it's going to come from.
There's no question about it.
It's the only way it's going to happen.
Yeah. So it's very encouraging. You and I have been saying this for months, right? And predicting that people would come out into the streets, but also maybe a little fearful that maybe they wouldn't, right? I mean, so we're saying they're going to, but are they going to? And, are they going to sustain it? Is it going to be like a one-day women's march, or is this going to be like actually a counterforce that can't be removed?
And there were little, if no, incidents of any violence. I mean, really like one or two.
Yeah.
So everyone coming out is aware that they could be baited. They could be baiting Trump to declare martial law, but can't do that when there's 2,000 demonstrations in almost every state of the country, including Alabama, by the way.
No, it was amazing. Some of the communities that you would never expect, right, would have any significant. It was everywhere. There were people everywhere coming out, and places like Utah, had giant crowds in Salt Lake City. So this is really encouraging because it's going to take this kind of mass demonstration and mass courage for us to survive.
Yes, but I think it's certainly possible.
It gives us hope. It gives us, we've been trying to smoke a lot of hopium around here, but I think this is high THC strength hopium. This is strong. This is strong stuff.
Oh, so you've added THC to our hope. I see.
Well, if we're smoking hopium, it's got to have something in it, right? But this is strong hopium. Look, I don't know what the active ingredient is, but it's strong. Is
But you associate it to THC.
That's right. But unlike Trump, I didn't go on to say, look, they've got THC. They're taking the THC. And now they're in the streets because of making them crazy.
No, it's true. It wasn't a loose association on your part. Anyway,
it was a very trenchant one, actually. Relevant. To me, maybe.
Necessarily. But in any case, you had one more thing for us before the interview.
I had one more thing before the interview. We had last 2 weeks ago, or our last show, we had a quote from Catch 22. It made me think that occasionally when I see trenchant quotes, they're worth ending the show on. This is a quote from Sun Tzu, the person who wrote The Art of War, and I have no idea what year it was, so I'm not even going to try to estimate, but a long time ago. I think it's before Christ. But I actually have no idea what year he wrote it. But it's a long, long time ago. Someone will correct me in the notes, and that's good. We should know. I don't know what year it was, but here's what he had to say: An evil man will burn his own nation to the ground to rule over the ashes. That is what we are seeing. We're about to interview a Harvard Medical School professor about the attempt to, the termination of funding for research. And she's going to talk about how, hey, this isn't, getting rid of waste, fraud, and abuse. This is kneecapping and decapitating American science. That's the idea. It's not an accident. If you're an arsonist and your plan is to burn the country to the ground so you can rule over the ashes, that explains almost all of their behavior. One of the things that we say in science is, right, Occam's razor, if there's one theory that explains all the data, that theory is the correct one. And one theory that explains all the data is what Sun Tzu said. They're trying to burn the country to the ground to rule over the ashes. It's very simple, but only an evil leader would do that. And of course, malignant narcissism is the essence of evil, according to Erich Fromm, who invented the diagnosis.
I take a more nuanced view, but it's an important point. And so we're going to go on to our interview. We had some technical difficulties with the interview, and so you may notice that it's actually from the Zoom platform rather than from our typical platform. But we're very, very happy to present it to you now. We're so pleased to have our guest today. Anaita Dua is a professor of thoracic surgery at Harvard Medical School and at Massachusetts General Hospital. Did I get that right, Dr. Dua?
You did. It is vascular surgery, but very close.
It's really not, but thanks for being nice about it. Dr. Dua is an extraordinary person. It's funny. We're so pleased to have you to find a time for you to come with us. But I only recently been reading your CV, your background, and what our audience won't know from looking at your webpage is what a star you are within medicine.
Thank you.
Really extraordinary. Dr. Dua is an author of more than 140 peer-reviewed articles. She has, if I get this right, you have a master's in both in study of trauma as well as in a master's of business.
I do.
Is that right? And has her own clinic looking at. I'm going to ask you, but really a specialist in rehabilitation of limbs and surgery. Did I get that right?
Yes, peripheral artery disease. So I specialize in keeping legs attached to bodies, which is super important.
Well put. But she is really at the top of her field, and so we're very, very lucky to have her here.
Right. And we have her here not because we have a problem with our legs being attached to our bodies, but because Dr. Dua has become a real activist in the area of combating all of these research cuts that have affected Harvard in particular, but really all of American universities and all of the research institutes in the government. So I'm very glad to have you here, Dr. Dua. As two psychologists, we grew up in the scientist practitioner model. We understand how important science is and how it works in the medical setting and in the academic setting. Maybe you could explain to people in the audience just how devastating these cuts are to research and what the effects will be.
Absolutely. I think it's important to break things down. Usually when we talk about research and medicine and, Medicaid, and there are these huge concepts that people really just, as with all of us work with patients, you have to break it down to the person in front of you. And the thing about research as a whole is that research has changed over the last few years in regards to like what it really entails. And it's not just a person sitting with a pipette on a bench holding a mouse anymore. That is part of things, but actually it's taking that science and bringing it to your mom so that when she gets that horrible cancer diagnosis, we can implement what we've learned to save her life. But you can imagine what it takes to go from that little mouse protein all the way through to something that your mom can use to be saved. And what does that take? Time and money. And what happens with these research cuts is the money that we would have used to push forward the science to finally translate, that's the magic word, translate from the bench, from where you actually do the research into the human being, that's what's getting killed. Because what's happened is things that it takes to do the research, like the literal material that we use, costs more money. The space that we do it in, the rent has gone up. The cost of having a postdoctoral student that helps you do it costs more. And of course, the FDA and CDC and all these other groups that have to make sure that what you're doing is safe and can actually go to the human. These are years of processes with lots and lots of money, millions, frankly. And so the research cuts kind of put a chokehold on all the wonderful things that are going to come down the pike. And the saddest thing about it, I think the key is there's no way to know what your future would have been.
That's what I was thinking.
A cure for your horrible heart attack that was just about to make it? We'll never know because the research just got stopped.
I know. That's what I was thinking. I had the exact same thought. That's how sort of devious it is in a way, because, okay, we're going to talk about, cuts to Medicare and whatnot, and that's something people will feel. They'll know when their insurance has been taken away. When you're dying of cancer, you won't know that you would have lived.
Right.
Research had been done 10 years ago that was stopped by President Trump. Right. So you won't put the two and two together, but it's actually going to kill you.
Correct. I mean, we have to be frank about it. I think sometimes we dance around these things and we need to be completely straightforward. But science is exactly that. It is the unknown. We don't know. And so there is trial and failure. Everybody knows that. I mean, even, the explorers who came to America in the first place, they didn't get it right the first time. They were trying and trying and trying. Then they finally got here. In science, it's the same way. I stand on the shoulders of giants before me, and most of the stuff I'm standing on are mistakes. Not mistakes like they screwed up mistakes, but they tried something and it didn't fail. And then they tweaked it a little bit and that failed. And then they tweaked it a little bit and it worked. And now mom's alive. And that's what we seem to forget. And that takes time. So what my concern is, what's happening today in 2025 is going to affect this unborn person who is going to get a heart attack in 2050. And that person will not be able to survive. And we have to make up now for all this time, because science, if it stops like this, it takes a lot to get the machine humming again.
Absolutely. What strikes me as a great tragedy is that, and maybe it's the fault of all of us involved in academia in one way or the other, is that the country has never been educated as to what the process of science is. Right. So when Donald Trump says, for example, we give Harvard $8 billion and we don't get anything for it. He's not giving $8 billion to Harvard or other great universities. He's paying for research. That's the whole point of it. But the country isn't educated as to what that means, because we haven't at any point until now had to protect the process of science. Yeah. And I believe he's doing it not just for power, but for ratings. If he can look like he's a big guy beating up universities, doesn't matter to him that he's actually destroying the process of scientific investigation that you just described.
That's right. And the saddest thing about it, if you even want to, if it even is for the ratings, it's not working, because the approval rating just yesterday has dropped, but for obviously a variety of things, but this is a piece of it. The thing about it is that it's nuanced, as with all science. Are there things that we can do better in terms of the NIH, in terms of spending? Of course. I mean, nobody's going to argue that. All researchers would say that. But you have to know if I have a patient in front of me and they're sick, they're just sick. I can't just say, just you should just give up. It's time to go comfort measures. I need to diagnose what's wrong with the person. That takes time. I need to actually get down to the nitty gritty and then try to fix that specific problem to make them better. It can't just be a baseball bat hit of, globally, oh, I'm just going to, for example, ban food dyes. Okay, great. Now we're all going to be healthy. No, that is fake news, to use that term. And so I think you're right. We have done, and it's not just in this realm. I think we have done a bad job in a lot of realms not communicating what we do, whether it be under the guise of professionalism or under maybe kind of an elitist thinking that people won't understand, a paternalistic view. I'm not sure what it was, but we're paying for that a little bit now because indeed, people don't get the day to day. And by the time they will get it, they'll only get it when it's affecting them. And that's going to be too late.
So the lie that's being told to the American public is this process is about, as you say, ferreting out waste or fraud or abuse, right? Which, we can always use some efficiency measures. Right. But this would be like, he's doing surgery with a chainsaw, right? Correct. He's literally kneecapping.
He said he was.
Yeah. Right. And they're proud of it. They're waving, the chainsaw on the stage. But people need to understand they're really kneecapping all of American science. And I think the reason for it is not just for ratings. It's because in order to have an authoritarian takeover of a free society, all experts must be eliminated. All science, all knowledge, any institution that can have an ability to say to the president, you are wrong. And so I think what people don't understand is this is not, first of all, it's certainly not an efficiency measure. But it's also an attack on truth, knowledge, and reality itself.
I totally agree with that. And I mean, this is, if anything, it's not at all something novel. To your point, it's part of a playbook. I mean, you can literally put it on ChatGPT and say, if I wanted to do an authoritarian takeover, what's the first step? Oh, there it is. So it's the sad thing about it is I don't know. I'm not there yet personally that this is some sort of diabolical genius thing. It just seems like just a stupid move that people have just not thought through. And I could be wrong. But, in some of these other instances in history, there, at least from a retrospective view, we see like clear maneuvering of the institutions and whatnot to try to get to this goal, to your point about authoritarianism. And in this situation, there's been so much reversal so quickly. I mean, even yesterday, I think it was the J1 visa thing reversed, so, and then the immigrant thing. Okay, well, now it's okay for people if you work in farms and you work in hotels. Research, some of the grants have already been, given back. The judges have kind of halted it. So it's been too much. Even now, I know this is not about this particular thing, but literally the question about what's going on with Iran and Israel right now and getting involved. I mean, the whole argument was we're not in foreign wars. Now here we are about to jump in again. So there's been so much of that. It just comes across to me as just incompetence.
Well, I want to say, I half agree with you. It's not genius, but it is diabolical. And you don't have to be a genius. You don't have to be a genius to type into ChatGPT. If I want to take over a country, if I want to commit an authoritarian takeover of a country, what should I do? I'll tell you to do exactly what he's doing.
We forget,
just to get rid of experts.
We forget sometimes, and I think this is where. And this is, I love America and I love the people here and I love this country. And I wouldn't be, I wouldn't love it so much if it weren't for, when I meet my patients, like those are the real like Americans. And I know what they are because I'm there with them every single day. I don't sit in a room, with a bunch of suits. I am with the public every single day. And this is the one thing I can tell you because I've lived around the world. Americans are special. And this is true. It may sound kind of silly, but I really mean this. We are very special in that it's going to take a lot. It can be done, but it's going to take a lot to really push us over into an authoritarianism way. Our country was born on fighting that sort of behavior. And the American people, to your point earlier, Dr. Segal, about educating them, it is on us to do things like this so that they understand and then they can push back. And if they did, get that information, they would be able to push back. But then I'll speak to the American people and also say, we have to get away from our like kind of mouse brain of like, I want immediate results. If you want to fix the NIH, it's going to take a decade, if not longer. So if you want your president to do something, you can't force him to do it in 3 months or you're going to get garbage in, garbage out. If I have to do a surgery on you and it takes 6 hours, it just takes 6 hours and you have to sign the consent. You try to rush me and you're going to have a problem. And I think the American people need to accept that for this thing, we need to make politics boring again and go back to the processes to figure out what needs to be fixed and then let our government work instead of getting into the situation that we're in right now where we essentially cut our nose off to spite our face.
Dr. Dua, you are the first person to make this argument that it will take a lot of effort to force our national character into autocracy. I absolutely agree with you. It's something John and I go back and forth on this program about it because I'm very worried about authoritarian takeover. On the other hand, there's just
something
between Trump's stupidity and incompetence and his desperate need to be approved of, because when ratings go low, he backs away. Plus the American character. Some days it gives me hope. Some days I'm worried, but we all have to do what we can. Well, one of the things that happened was, and I'm not even sure where this is. I think there's a lawsuit about it, about cutting indirect costs down to 15%, which was this abrupt thing. And, again, as far as not educating the public, every year I have to explain to my Cornell undergraduates what an indirect cost fee is.
Yeah.
I actually spent 10 minutes on this program once explaining it, that this is the way that we subsidize universities by approving of their research and giving 60 or 65% of the cost of a grant on top of that cost to facilitate the university. And no one knows what it is outside of research academia.
That's right.
But I don't think he came to fix the NIH. I think he came to destroy it.
No, of course. But the thing is that we need, I think, academic research spokespeople to explain and educate.
Good point.
And it seems to me that you're beginning, Dr. Dua, to do that, to be someone who actually explains what this is about. Because people have to really know the steps. Once you understand what indirect cost means, it's not hard to understand.
Exactly. But again, it goes back to again the nuances and the transparency. I was born in the United Kingdom, and I went back to medical school there, and I thought it was just going to be like going to a state in the United States, and it wasn't. It was actually, ironically, a culture shock for me to be in the UK because they are different. Their culture is different. They're much more they're reserved, and it's no before yes. Americans are like, let's get it. That's how we are as people. And but part of that thing is that we really value authenticity and what we call straight shooting. I don't want you to bullshit me. And the elites and the academics come across occasionally in our conversation as people that are kind of talking around an issue. And again, it goes back to what I mentioned earlier about sort of, we're trying to be maybe professional, but it's coming across as condescending or coming across as you're trying to obfuscate something that the patient needs to know. And I can say this, as a vascular surgeon, I'm dealing with patients who are smokers who do, Joe the plumber, like that's the type of patient that works with me. And so I have to come in there and say, listen, man, if you don't stop smoking, your leg is going to be in the bin. And as aggressive as that sounds, it works because they're like, thank you for not talking nonsense. So to your point about indirect costs, I think, we make the mistake of saying, the university needs the 60% on top, which translates to X, thousands of dollars for the rent. And then the American public sees, well, this company, this administration has all these endowments. Harvard, for example, has all these. So I don't understand. I can't reconcile what's happening. And then we kind of just say, oh, we're done with the conversation there. And that's a mistake because that indirect cost is going to the health insurance of my postdoctoral research fellow who's collecting the blood to do the procedure. It goes to the rent of the space. It goes to the light. And we forget all those things have gone up with inflation.
Yes.
The other thing people don't realize is there's been a partnership between the federal government and research really since World War II. And so this is really violating that agreement that we've sort of had in our society. It was a civil agreement that we wanted as a society to support research, not only for medical research, but, things like the internet, get discovered through government research, right? So things of incalculable value get discovered through scientific research. And so we have part of our success as a nation has been that we've invested so much of our national wealth in research that we've come up with innovations that have magnified our wealth as well as our health. And so people don't realize that violating this basic contract, because it's hard to put it together, right? That means you're not going to have the internet 3 or, whatever the next internet will be, right? Because it won't be invented, or you won't have the vaccine for the disease you have because it won't be invented. But how can people understand? I guess this is what you're trying to do, to educate the public, to help them understand what they're losing if progress is stopped now, how it's going to affect them and their children and their grandchildren going down in time.
Exactly. It's a matter of teaching people that it's not a one-to-one. I mean, AI, for example, the beauty of artificial intelligence is that it can pick up non-linear relationships and identify things that we otherwise, as humans, would not maybe pick up. Similarly, research is relatively non-linear. In fact, all the cool stories that come out about how penicillin was discovered, or how insulin was done, or how GPS was brought to are all like,
a good example.
We're trying to do this, and then that totally jacked up. I mean, even Viagra. Let's talk about something people care about. Viagra was the
something close to my heart.
Close to a lot of people's hearts, literally.
Literally.
Important stuff. That was a drug that was meant for something very specific. That was not a man's penis. And yet here we are, multi-billion-dollar industry. And guess what? I tell you what, it helps us ladies too, obviously, because if our men are, you get the connection.
I get the picture.
Yeah, we
get it.
So the point is that, I'm just saying, that's a little bit of an extreme example, but just indicating that these discoveries are about the community, the scientific community working together. Something that may have totally failed for me, maybe the answer for lung transplant. And that's the kind of stuff that if we fragment, we lose. And if you don't care about science at all, let's pretend you just don't care. You just want America to be number one, which I also want, and stay in this position. Well, there's only two ways in this world that you stay number one. And they're both equal. One is scientific, prowess, and second is economics. And they, by the way, they are extremely
they're intertwined. Right.
So if you lose one, you lose the other, and we are losing, because right now, if China takes that over or Europe takes it over, that's it, and there's no coming back from that, because people will start to say, my colleagues' children who are going to be going off into a particular profession will say, yeah, you know what, I'm not going to go into research. I'm going to do this instead, and that's how we start to lose our best and brightest, and that, of course, is intertwined with immigration as well. So. There are a lot of things
that's right.
that are going to knock us down.
I'm glad you mentioned immigration, because they're part of the energy that brings the new ideas, the new entrepreneurial energy, the progress. In other words, America is first. America is first now. Yeah. But but the damage he's doing is going to make America last, or at least somewhere in the middle of the pack, maybe. But our primacy comes from research, from economics, and economics and research are connected, as you say. And so what we're really doing is we're essentially defaulting. We're essentially just taking ourselves out of the competition, taking ourselves out of the game. And, we gave a quote from Sun Tzu earlier, who said, the evil leader wants to burn down his society so he can rule the ashes. Mm-hmm. So this is what we're seeing: destruction. It's not efficiency, it's destruction. And it's destruction of our core, not only values, but the source of our wealth.
Correct.
But to add, and it's being done incompetently by an erratic, failing autocrat who really cares about, he calls his poll numbers his ratings, because he feels like he's still on The Apprentice. Dr. Dua, one quick comment. I love your Viagra example, but also I was thinking of antipsychotic medication, which was discovered because they thought it was a tranquilizer, and they used it on people in mental institutions, and lo and behold, they stopped hearing voices, or at least they were much quieter. So I love what you're arguing about lateral thinking and about that kind of convergence. The other thing you said earlier about, the way in which medical and research professionals can seem aloof. The thing that worries me about what happened during the pandemic was I'm old enough to remember in the 80s when Fauci, Dr. Fauci, was heading up the HIV research team. He was such a hero back then, you know. And when he came back on as a senior person to oversee the pandemic, I thought we're in good hands. And look how he was roughed up.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
You know, and so whoever it becomes a spokesperson for this kind of position, and I'm hoping you will be one of them. You know, you guys have to be really tough.
Bring it. Don't worry. I mean, I'll tell you, you know, that's part of it. He took it. And you know what? Nobody's perfect on either side. Obviously, we're all humans. I mean, and like mistakes are going to be made. In the case of COVID, of course, we can all armchair quarterback and say, that was too long or this was too, but you know, intentions do matter. Intentions matter. And it is important to make sure in science that both sides are able to speak. So that is one thing I agree with, that, you know, on we could say the Republican side or the opposite side, this idea of, you know, squashing the opposition, even though it was with the idea of saying like, right now we can't afford it, we need to just move forward. We should have had conversation. We did have a website that had non-peer reviewed publications that were coming up for us to be able to see science quickly. And the world came together doing that. And then after COVID ended, then of course we went back to our peer reviewed processes, which basically meant other people reviewed. But a lot of that scientific information, nobody knew if it was true or not, because again, it wasn't peer reviewed, but we needed information fast to be able to do what we were doing and save lives. So I think, you know, it is tough when somebody now in retrospect 2 years ago is saying, well, you should have done this or you shouldn't have done that. But, you know, that's that whole courage of the non-combatant. He was the guy in the seat. So, you know, he did what he needed to do, and we'll never know. We'll never know. You can't go back in time and say, if these many older people had just succumbed to COVID, then the economy would have been here, and then our kids would have been there. You just can't do that. All we can say is we tried to save as many lives as possible, and we did the best that we could do with very little information.
Well,
right?
I'm really glad to have you in the fight, Dr. Dua. And we're running out of time, but Harry, do you have any other questions?
I don't, but we'd love to have you come back and periodically and find out where things are, particularly in this battle that you're joining, which I think is such a great thing.
Thank you. Well, if you want more information on it, the pack that we specifically run is called Healthcare for Action. And it specifically brings together healthcare workers and scientists, and we try to put them into federal office or local office with the idea of building a bench so we can get more people who can communicate and ultimately get elected.
Can you tell our audience again the name of that pack?
Yeah. Of course. It's healthcarefораction.com. And we started it in 2022 and have had a number of people elected. And, you know, we are all about diversity of the Democrats. And I don't mean diversity in the classic form. I mean diversity like, you know, there are people on our board who own guns. There are people who are so progressive that they do not. Let's just say that. And, you know, but we all work together ultimately because now, guess what brings people together the best? A common enemy. So you guys are psychologists, you know that, right?
One last question. I saw in your bio that you also are a pit bull rescue person. Is that something you're still involved with, or is your family taking up too much time?
No way. Family is never going to take too much time for dogs. Are you joking? That's another American like stronghold. So yeah, Trump doesn't have a dog, just for everybody to say, you know, we should say that. That's important. That's a sign.
That tells us something.
But no, I love animal rescue. And actually in a lot of places in the United States, and specifically when I was in Texas doing my postdoctoral research, a lot of pit bulls, unfortunately, are kept, you know, in dog fighting, and then they get euthanized and whatnot. And so I used to take them and their puppies and raise them so that they could get to a point where the puppies could be adopted out and the mom could be adopted out. So we do a lot of that still.
That's wonderful. Well, listen, thanks again for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
All right.
Thank you.
Well, what a delight it was to hear from a scientist who is undergoing the very assault on her work and on science in general, to have really that voice speaking to us today, and someone who I think is and will become a very important activist.
And well, she already is. She's part of a super PAC that is raising money to protect American science and to elect people who will protect American science.
Wow, pretty great.
But I think she makes the point that science is one of the sources of America's primacy and strength. And so we're just cutting ourselves off at the knees. We're literally cutting off the source of our strength and wealth and primacy. Again, because, as Sun Tzu said, an evil man will burn his country to the ground to rule over the ashes. And that's why they're decapitating science and virtually everything else.
Well, certainly to eliminate opposition and to assert dominance over institutions that they don't have dominance over. I'm sure they'd be happy to have some version of Harvard and the other institutions that they could then control. But that is a story for a different day.
Absolutely. Yeah, they don't have a Harvard, just saying. Because they're stupid.
There is Liberty University.
Yeah, it's like I hear it's the Harvard of the Ozarks. The hell it is. The Harvard of the Appalachians.
As they used to say on the Carson show, we're going to get letters. So, John, what time is it?
I think it may be time for shrink wrap. What have we learned today, Harry?
What did we learn today? I have more hope this week. Some weeks I don't. I mean, certainly when I heard about the assassinations in Minnesota, I was heartsick. And when I heard about who was killed, and it's that foreboding of a terrible future. On the other hand, there was the No Kings March.
Right.
And there was Americans in every region standing up to this encroachment on liberty, on this right. Appropriation of power, of truth, of language. And I do think it's a battle between the nature of the American conscience and culture and the aggressive assault on institutions by Trump and his unqualified and stupid cabinet and officials. And we're going to have to sit and watch this play out. And we all have to contribute something. And as I always say, I'm going to say it again in different words, which is we need to pay attention. We should all be doing something, whether it's listening to podcasts like this and forwarding them to our friends. Feel free to do that with our show, but other shows. If it means writing to your congressperson, if it means taking part in a march, do something and pay attention. On the other hand, please don't forget to love your partner, your children, your friends. Don't forget to listen to music. Don't forget to appreciate good art and great television and great movies, because we have to live our lives while being vigilant about our democracy. That would be my lesson for this week.
I mean, really, there's so many things that happened in this really 2 weeks because we took a break, but so much that happened in this period of time that could cause us to be discouraged, because it's an escalation, it's a progression, So they've put troops on the streets. We predicted that was going to happen. They're manhandling Democratic politicians on a regular basis. Now, one has been assassinated with her husband, which we also predicted was going to happen. So it's pretty grim, in a lot of ways. But the hopium is the American people. The American people came out en masse. And so that's why, even though all these terrible things happened this week, and they did all these terrible things, we're feeling more hope this week than we have in some other weeks. And, I actually hate it when people say, well, I have faith in the American people. I'm not so sure I have faith in the American. But this shows that faith in the American people is not misplaced, that there is, as you say, in our DNA, a spirit of liberty and common sense and decency. And that this is, I think the other thing that encouraged me was the failure of the parade.
Yes, that's the other side of the same coin.
Exactly. So, usually we're like big downers on the show, but this is a legitimate basis for feeling some sense of, well, I'm the biggest downer. Yeah. But I feel here that this hopium that we're smoking is the real thing. I don't think it's a hallucination. Thank you.
I agree, and I what I liked about the organizers of the No Kings demonstration day really was that we began as a nation in rebelling against a king.
That's right.
In rebelling against being appropriated and dominated and used, and we proclaimed our independence. It's always moved me that we did that, but ever more so as we see someone trying to overturn the Declaration of Independence, which you believe was part of the Civil War,
which also was completely unnecessary.
You can't make it up. You just can't
make it up, folks. No, we can't. We couldn't.
So, John, you took some heart in the No Kings March last weekend.
I did, and I have to say, I took some perverse pleasure in the failure of Trump's parade. Made him very grouchy, though.
So I've heard. I mean, was he really upset about it?
Well, as a matter of fact, if you want to hear, this is Trump's lament.
He's been singing this.
Yes, he's been singing this all over town.
All right, let's hear it.
Are you ready to hear it?
Absolutely.
Okay. Hit it, Rex. It's my parade, and I'll scowl if I want to. Scowl if I want to. Scowl if I want to. You would scowl too if it happened to you.
Nobody knows where my crowd size has come, while millions march and no king. Why do the people hate me so? Why won't they kiss my ring?
It's my parade. I'll scowl if I want to. Scowl if I want to. Scowl if I want to. You would scowl too if it happened to you.
Play all my MAGA best hits, but leave me alone for a while. Until the people love me, I have no reason to smile.
It's my parade. I'll scowl if I want to. Scowl if I want to. Scowl if I want to. You would scowl too if it happened to you.
The Dems are 6 million strong, marching across the country like they don't have a king, ruling their own democracy.
It's my parade. I'll scowl if I want to. Scowl if I want to. Scowl if I want to. You would scowl too if it happened to you.
Thanks for watching, folks. Have a good week. Keep the faith. We'll be back next week. Be well.
You would scowl too if it happened to you.